think we need to be teaching. Like there's another thing. Like Babe and I, like when we have disagreements, he's like, well, we shouldn't have disagreements in front of the kids. I said, yes, we should. Like we're not slanging matches or anything like that, but we are allowed. We should be having disagreements in front of the kids. They need to be able to see that we can disagree and still go downstairs and cook dinner together. Like they need to be able to know that just because we don't agree on something and we're having a discussion about it, that doesn't necessarily mean, like, don't be fearful.
Right, now just to put on that, see that phrase that everyone loves to throw around it, agree to disagree. That's what it is. It's agreeing that we don't have an agreement, but agreeing that we still do this thing called life. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome back to another episode of the Couple School Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by the lady of self-love herself, Charmaine Lawrence.
Guys. How are you all? How are you? Ready?
I'm good. I got questions.
Always got questions.
So, my question for this week is this. So, if you come from a broken home, are you destined to break homes?
No.
You sure?
No, I mean, no. I mean, it's possible, but it could be not destined. No, the answer is no. I think basically it depends on the person. I think it depends on the person's growth. I think it depends on the person's experience. And I also, I think it depends on the person's experience. Like, I don't think the destined. That sounds so final.
Yeah.
Like, so final.
I think the word destined is misplaced. But I do think that I think you experience what you've experienced if you're not careful about your experience. So I think you need to be mindful of where you've come from and understand that that's where you've come from and not necessarily where you're going to end up to stop it from being where you end up. I think a lot of people do go from broken homes and then create broken homes because actually the broken home was the norm.
Yeah.
For them, it's a bit like with people that have never really had money.
Yeah.
And they wonder why they never have money. It's because they've never had it, so they never know what to do when they've got it. So their history has told them my bank account's supposed to be either in the red or just above zero. So whenever they get something to surplus to spend it. Rather than if you were looking at somebody else where their history was someone that's either born around money, had lots of money, or has had someone that's taught them how to save.
Yeah.
They're used to being in a situation when they've got surplus to their requirements, but still operate within certain boundaries. When your experience tells you that this is the norm, that's what your homeostasis, that's what your brain would automatically lead you to.
Yeah.
And I think when we take a look at this in respect of this particular question in terms of broken homes, if your history is a broken home, and it's particularly if it's a damaged one, it's attached with traumas and all of that jazz.
Yeah.
If you're not mindful of that and aware of that, then you will say, well, you're more likely or more susceptible to actually creating that, because actually that volatile situation is where you're most comfortable.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Okay. I don't want this to be a really deep conversation. I think broken home is a phrase that was used back in the day when we were so focused on nuclear families.
Yeah.
And it was very much like, the norm is mum, dad, kids, and possibly a dog.
Maybe a cat.
Maybe a cat. Right?
Are you a dog or a cat?
And so if you didn't have that, it was like, oh my gosh, the home is broken, kind of thing. So hopefully no one's offended by the word. We're just going to use that because that's the term in terms of in terms of the nuclear family. I think today, people see it as the norm because more people are growing up in families where there's either one parent or they're living with grandparents. I do think there's a likelihood to see that as being normal, and therefore they don't mind creating that norm. And I think when I became a single mum, I was devastated, more so because I felt like I'd be falling into a statistic of the single mother. And I felt like, oh my gosh, my children are going to be at a disadvantage. This is going to happen, that has happened. And I felt like I did the complete opposite. I was raised by a single mum. I had my stepdad was around for a bit until I was, I think like 8. And then it was just us and my brothers. And I used to think, I don't want this. I used to read my Mills and Boons books where it was all nuclear families. It was all
Mills and Boons. You're gonna
Mills
no
and
wait.
Boons.
You're gonna have to
Guys,
explain
go
that
and have a look at Mills
because
and Boons.
some people won't understand the Mills and Boons reference.
Okay, so back in our
and you'll
era,
have to say it. The steamy books that were in the back of the library. Yeah, I read them too. The steamy books in the back of the library. Let's not play games with it.
Okay, so Mills and Boons was a series of books.
Yes.
Where they were.
Go on.
They were a little bit steamy. They were
little bit.
Yeah,
they were thought provoking. Anyone that had any kind of imagination, they were designed for you to read the Mills and Boons book, and it was the equivalent. Well, I'm not even going to say it.
It was amazing, guys.
Your imagination became like certain free websites that people look at now.
Yeah, but nice. It was
the nice
elegant
bits.
and classy, right? So if I read these
not some
books,
of the ones that I read. But anyway, go on.
My mum had a collection of these books on a cabinet, and I used to love to read, so I would go and I picked it up one day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love it. I read all of them, Andrew. Listen, I know we're going to topic, guys, but I've got to tell the story, right? I read all of these books from
of course you did. It was like an encyclopedia, A to Z.
From 13 to 16, and back in the day, if you're our age, you will understand this. Where I lived, we used to have the library bus that used to come around. It's like a bus. Did you have the library bus?
I didn't have a library bus, no.
The library bus would come around and it would stop and you'd go and pick up books from the library. And they never had Mills and Boons. I was just so upset because I'd have to go all the way down the road to the actual library.
They didn't put them on that bus because they were giving those books to children. Because they were giving the books to children. The Mills and Boons books were designed for children. They were designed for adults. That's why your mum had it.
But my mum didn't hide them, so I didn't know they were steamy. Anyway, it was always based on the husband coming in from work and the wife there, and she'd be sitting on the nice soft shag pile rug with a glass of red wine, waiting for her husband to come in. They would make sweet love on...
Sweet love. That's the abridged version. Anyway, go on.
That is what I read. That's what I remember. And I remember all of those things, and I was thinking, this is what I want for my life. This is what my life's going to be like. And I was raised in a community of single mums. Community. All of my mum's friends, sisters, all of them were single mums. And so for me, I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to have a husband and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And I set my life up, as you know, I'm a planner, for my life to be that way. And so when it wasn't that way, I was worried that the statistics of being a single mum was going to affect the family because there's only one income, blah, 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 blah. So then back to the question, I think it depends on what people see as norm and what they see as okay. And I think if they feel like this is normal, it's not a big deal, then it will continue. But I think if they feel like, actually, I want the best possible start or the best possible life or the best possible arrangement for my family, they tend to not follow that route. But I think if they are not even looking at family in that sense, they tend to just follow the route.
In that question, I use the word broken homes quite deliberately, and I only put it in there to be triggering, because even if you take a look at my own timeline, my dad died when I was 8 years old. My mum she made a choice really that she wasn't going to even entertain stroke date, stroke whatever. She was going to put me and my sister first. And I think we've covered this on podcasts of old. So she didn't go down that route. So I had, it was me, my mum and sister very much for the longest of time. And I suppose for that, I made this, we have these visions in our heads when we were younger. I'm like, right, cool. I'm not being a sperm donor for South East London. I'd seen guys go about and got kids here, there and everywhere. I'm like, that is not going to be me.
Yeah.
Didn't end up being that way, but not going to be me. End up like 3 litters, mums, and 5 children. So,
yeah,
you know, is as it is. But, you know, I think I like this question because it's a question I think that everyone should ask themselves, irrespective of what situation you're in.
mm.
And it's about you choosing your future rather than you accepting your fate.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's really about for me. Like when I speak to people that have come from situations that they're not pleased with, happy with, or would have chosen.
Yeah.
The tendency is if you're not aware that your situation fits into one stroke all 3 of those brackets, you will end up recreating that of which you dislike, disapprove of, or hate
Yeah.
in your own life. And then that breeds self-hate within itself.
Mm.
The fact that also a bit to remember is you are the author of your own story.
Yeah.
You know? So you get to choose. What happened to you is what happened to you. And 9 times out of 10, especially if we're kids, we weren't the authors of that story. We were the characters within it. You know, the adults that were around you chose what that story is. But you as an adult, when you get there, you get the pen. You get the pen and you get a blank page. And most importantly, you get to decide how many blank pages you get, provided you've still got air in your lungs. So at any point in time, you can turn the page and go, okay, cool, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to behave like that anymore. I'm not going to accept that anymore. I'm not going to have these people in my life anymore. I'm going to do something different. And the reason why I put that in that question in there was really to illustrate and home in on that point that your history doesn't have to be your story. You can choose to write something different for your future. But in order to do that, you have to be aware of the parts of your history that you disagree with.
Yeah.
Now, there are even within those traumatic stories that lots of people have, and I'm not taking anything away from anything that anybody's experienced. There are little gems of goodness that float in there that were signs for you to understand what might possibly be. And sometimes when the rest of our story is dark, we miss those little beacons of light because we're so focused on the dark. But if you actually took a look back over your timeline and go, okay, well, where was a beacon of light? Where was a point in my history that I had some sort of enjoyment from?
Yeah.
You start to realize how your life could be if you focused on that as opposed to the dark parts. So, particularly when it comes to our relationships, we don't have to be what our parents were, or our uncles were, or our aunts were, or our neighbour was, or what have you. I mean, you're a fighting case in point, and I eventually am a case in point for that as well. You know, you can choose to live how you see fit on your terms by what you choose to, and therefore also most importantly, and it's a lesson that I had to teach myself a few years ago, is that sometimes we can be so focused on our past that we end up denying our future its future. You know, I was so caught up on the loss of my dad and the pain that I had associated with that and how I felt about that happening to me. It bypassed me that I had now 4 to now 5 kids. I was actually delivering the same absence to them that I experienced by fate to me because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I had to find a way to go, okay, well, scrap that because that's not going to be their future and change that.
Yeah.
But you have to be self-aware.
Yeah, you definitely have to be self-aware. And I also think that as parents who are single, there's a message that they should be delivering. And I think sometimes when you're a one-parent family, you create a happy story, which is fake to the kids when you are barely surviving. Some people, not all people, but barely surviving. So you go, oh yeah, everything's great. Da, 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 da. And so what the child sees is everything is just fantastic, blah, blah. There's nothing wrong with me being in this situation. This is great, da, 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 whatever. And they continue that because they don't have any other outlook. The outlook is what they've seen, and that's been fantastic. You know, I remember speaking to a guy, and he was basically like saying, well, you know, my mum did it, so I don't, like, his relationship was breaking down. He was like, well, you know, it's not a big deal. My mum did it, and my gran did it, so I don't see, like, it's not that big of a deal. And I think that's because in his experience as a child, it looked all rosy. Mum did everything. Mum made sure everything was good, but mum didn't deliver the message of actually how difficult it is to be sometimes on your own when you're having to do this and do that and build a career and make sure your kids are good, and not having someone to lean on. And sometimes you don't even, some mums or dads don't even have like family to lean on. Like back in the day, it was like a whole family unit.
It's
like
not the case anymore.
there was no nurseries. Everyone was at the auntie's house or grandma's house or whatever. Now we're so much more isolated as a unit. So I think sometimes we have to kind of like deliver the message that and say, actually, it's really difficult. It's not, I would want you to have someone that you can lean on. I would want you to have someone that you can rely on, or someone that can help you do these things, or someone that is quite present, even if you're not with the partner, that they're still quite present and have a conversation and a dialogue so that they have access. And I think those are powerful conversations to have with your teenagers, so that they know like the power in being in relationships. And I think then their experiences is widened. I think sometimes people go into the world and their experience is just that, and they don't know any different. And they see other like couples and the nuclear family, and they're like, oh, that's great, but that's not my experience. I don't have access to that. This is what I have access to, and I think they don't see it. I think if would I be so hell bent on being married and so forth if I hadn't read the Mills and Boon series? I don't know.
I think you probably attribute certain other aspects to the Mills and Boon series.
I love my Mills and Boon series.
That hubby's experiences well and truly
Well,
I think of course he's not, especially if he's buying the book. I think as parents we sometimes miss the impression that we have on our kids.
Yeah.
And more importantly, the silent lesson that we have on our kids. I say to my friends all the time, our kids are watching you when you're not watching you.
Yeah. So
you have to be careful. So what you're delivering as the norm is what they now expect to be the norm. Mm. I remember I had this conversation with my mum a little while ago, and I said to her, you messed me up. And she's like, what do you mean? I mean, you cost me a couple of relationships. She's like, what do you mean? She's like, look, my mum's house, when you walk in there, like, if there was ever an apocalypse, my mum's house is the place that I go to. Reason being, because she could stock Tesco's. Like, my mum, has got a fridge and a freezer, then a chest freezer, and then a backup fridge. And she's got stuff in there that she doesn't know. Like, she's got food in there that she doesn't know that she's got. Like, we'd be okay. Like, I could live like I Am Legend in my mum's house. Done. I don't even need to go to the shop to play with the mannequins. Like, I can stay in the house.
Yeah.
I'm all good, But that's what I grew up with. So to me, in my head, in my juvenile head, like, fridges don't end. They always have, when you open them, they are always stocked to the point where something falls out at you. If you ever run out of something in the fridge, then you can always run to the freezer, because like, my mum throws milk and bread. That's how deep it got. Like, so when I started dating now, and I went to girls' houses, that I'm opening your cupboard. I'm like, what? I was confused. Like, where's all the food? Like, I didn't have a correlation between the money you were earning and the food you had in your fridge.
Yeah.
Now, my mum did an excellent, fantastic job of maintaining that bubble. Because even though we lost my dad when I was 8, my sister she wasn't even 1 at the time when he went. Like, we didn't have everything, but we were always left with something.
Yeah.
We always had an option, and my mum did a fantastic job at that. But because she hid the struggle so well, I didn't understand it. I was oblivious to it. So when I got let loose into the wonderful world of adulthood, I was like, what do you mean about money and food? Like, what's that? Like, food you just have. Because I'd always had that. Like, even now when you go to my mum's house, you open it, like, things will fall out at you, because that's how that's her non-negotiable. Like, her house will always have food. That's her non-negotiable. And for me, I'm starting to realize that actually, you know what, it's not my non-negotiable, because sometimes I can't afford food. You know what I mean? So, like, it's. I think we've got to be careful, like, with the story that we set our kids, and understanding the power that has, because that's what they set as their understanding. It's what they set as their foundation moving forward. Which is why I've started, especially for my kids. And I think it needs to start at a younger age than necessarily teenagers, like, to let them know, not necessarily let them know the full brutal ins and outs of it, but at least start to prep them for, okay, right, cool. relationships aren't supposed to be hunky dory. They're not all supposed to
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah,
Sometimes it
definitely.
doesn't. Sometimes we disagree, and even just that slight amendment to the Disney stroke internet truth that they pump out there might be enough to manage their expectations. So when
Yeah.
they do connect with someone, to go, okay, cool, we're two individuals. We're not supposed to get on all the time, but
Yeah.
that's all right. You know, it doesn't mean I'm gonna run or
Yeah,
you're gonna run.
exactly.
You know,
I think we need to be teaching, like there's another thing, like Babe and I, like when we have disagreements, he's like, well, we shouldn't have disagreements in front of the kids. I said, yes, we should. Like, we're not slanging matches or anything like that, but we are allowed, we should be having disagreements in front of the kids. They need to be able to see that we can disagree and still go downstairs and cook dinner together. Like, they need to be able to know that just because we don't agree on something and we're having a discussion about it, that doesn't necessarily mean, like, don't be fearful.
right now, just to
of
put on
it.
that, see that phrase that everyone loves to throw around there, agree to disagree. That's what it is. It's
It's
agreeing that we don't have an agreement, but agreeing that we still do this thing called life.
Yeah.
It's not agree to disagree in the sense of, okay, well, it's safe, I'm out. You know,
Yeah.
it's agreeing to still do this thing called life, even though we don't agree on this particular topic. You know?
Yeah.
And I think it's a lesson that a lot of people can take into relationships. Like, I spout on this all the time about compromise. If you take a look at, like, people believe that compromise is an IOU.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, okay, I'm going to lose this time, but you get me next time. No, compromise is a point of mutual disagreement. Like,
Yeah.
you're not happy, I'm not happy, but we're happy where we've agreed to be unhappy.
Yeah.
You know, that's what true compromise is about, and that's the true art of your relationships. And the better you get at that, the happier that point will be.
Yeah. I think the whole idea of destined to be a certain way, I do think that basically your experiences will just, I think it will just naturally subconsciously guide you in that space. I don't think it's necessarily a decision that you make that I'm going to do this. And I think sometimes you change the narrative based on what you've seen or what you've heard or what you've experienced. Like, I know people that have grown up in 2-parent families and then end up being in a single, and now they're like, oh my gosh, like blah, 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 like, you know, they look down on. And so I think it works either way. I think you have to kind of understand that life is just life, but you are the person that makes the decisions about how that goes and how you run your world. Do you get what I mean? I think we forget that, and I think it's just, as parents, I still go back to parents making their children understand that being realistic about life. I think we're so like, we just don't teach them realistic, like, stands and viewpoints or like experiences. We hide things from them. Do you get what I mean? Like, I feel like we just hide things from them all the time. Like, I remember, yeah, my family are Jamaican. My dad's side of the family, my mom and dad weren't together. I used to go to my dad's house, and you know when people say, "Oh, don't swear in front of the children," you could my dad's house. The amount of Jamaican patois swear words that would come out, just a normal conversation. They're not arguing. It's just a normal conversation. But as children, we knew that we are children and we do not swear. That is it. Adults swear because they can, and it doesn't mean they're upset. It doesn't mean they're arguing. It's how they communicate. They just do not. We just do not do it as children. And so for me, it just kind of made me think, like, because someone was like saying, "Oh, you know, if you swear, the children are going to swear." And I'm like, no, I didn't actually start swearing until I was literally like 16.
I still don't swear in front of my mum.
Do you get what I mean? Like, I don't swear in front of the elders. I call them. I don't swear in front of the elders. But it's like this idea that you can't do these things, but you can. You just have to teach children about real life. Like, do you get what I mean? Like, real life, so that they can make their informed decisions as they get older. If you hide things from them, oh, you know, everything is great, blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm just really great. Oh, this is us in our little tiny little unit, and like, you're going to go out to the world. Of course, like, they're going to just do what they know and not what they experience.
I think people need to remember that, like, your fears were built on something that's going to happen to everybody in the world, including your children. You know, you can't shield someone from disappointment. You can't shield someone from being hurt. Heartbreak is part of the world, like, and being let down is part of the world. And as much as you don't want your children to experience that, it doesn't mean that you can shield them from that. in fact, by shielding from that, what you're doing is you're preparing them for that when inevitably someone will deliver it. You know?
Yeah.
And I love what the example you just used in terms about the swearing in front of children. I don't swear in front of my mum now, but my mum never really swore in front of us when we were kids. But the importance of exposing life to your children in a healthy perspective is best done in your own house.
Yeah.
You know? So they understand that disappointment is part of it, but you can get past it. You know, they understand that people are going to let you down, but you can get past it. You can do something about it. You know, that solution-driven or solution-orientated way of life comes from you, and the more they see it, is the more that they'll adopt it and think that that's the norm.
Yeah.
So when things happen to them, they'll have that similar outlook for themselves.
Yeah. So going back to the question, I think they are destined to follow footsteps if they don't have a real experience of anything bigger or anything different to what they're experiencing at home. So like I think it really is about how you choose, what you allow them to see and not see. Do you know one thing my mum never used to say? We can't get that because we're broke. She never would say that. She'd be like, no, you can't have it. That was it. No, you can't have it.
She didn't add the definition, which is a great thing.
So yeah, she would never be like, we're broke, so you can't have that. She would just be like, no.
People misunderstand the power of labels. You know, when you say, like, when you constantly say, I'm broke, I'm broke, I'm broke, I'm broke, I'm broke, you start to believe it. And then you make decisions based on it, but based on the fact that you're broke. Then you start turning opportunities down because you're too broke to do them.
Yeah.
You know, you're broke, so how can you possibly do blah? And what you end up doing is passing that down to your children as well, because now, as far as they're concerned, that's the definition of life, because you are you're their first teacher.
Yeah.
You know? So I think you have to be very careful with the narrative that you put on there. Yes, install barrier, like boundaries. Yes, teach people that they need to work hard for X, Y, and Z and how to achieve stuff, and you can't just cheat your way to wherever. But don't make them believe that just because it's happened to you, it's going to happen to them. But most importantly, don't teach them that through your fear of it happening to them, you don't give them any exposure, or therefore they limit the tools that they have to deal with X, Y, and Z.
I don't think she was trying to teach me anything in that moment, but what she did teach me was like, I just can't have everything. Like, why do you need to have everything? Like,
but
that's what I got from it. Was like, okay, why? And she goes, well, why do you need to have it? Like, what's its purpose?
Yeah, but think about, okay, let's switch the narrative. Let's say, for argument's sake, she had added the line of, because we're broke.
Yeah. I'd have been like, well, we've got no money, we can't do this.
So it immediately means it's not a choice anymore.
Yeah.
It's something that's happened to us that prevents us from doing X.
Yeah.
By taking away that sentence, what she's gone is, why do you need it?
Yeah.
And that puts you in a better frame of mind. Okay, what do I actually need?
Yeah, so even now when we talk, she was saying, no, we didn't have no money. I don't know where you were going with that, but we didn't have any money. I'm like, I didn't know we didn't have any money. I just thought, you said to me, why do you need it? I didn't have an explanation of why I needed it. so she's like, okay, so that was it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and when she could afford to like get us stuff, we would have stuff. Do you get what I mean? Like, it was just like we never were in a position where we thought that she didn't have any money. It was very much like, okay, no, you can't have it. Like, there's no reason for you to have it. Like, there's actually nothing that you were bringing to me to let me know that you really need to have this.
And the thing is that's the prime example for anyone out there that's wondering and maybe struggling with whatever. It's how you frame it.
Yeah.
It's how you frame it dictates someone's belief or understanding of that. You know? And therefore then dictates their actions as they step into life and they have their own kids.
Yeah. So I know we kind of gone into like what we should be doing as parents to dictate or to kind of control how our children see the world, so that they are not destined to be like, following the broken home thing. But I do think it starts from there. I definitely think it does start from there. But I also think that today's society, we have so much access to so much information, so much things. We should know that we are the creators of our lives. I'm very much a vision person. This is my vision. This is how I'm getting there. And every time I get somewhere, I celebrate every single step of where I get to. And I think just understanding that you create your reality. I'm not saying you can just pick up a husband or pick up a wife anywhere, but you still create your reality.
You can.
I mean,
you might not want to keep him.
Anyway. You can. You can, but like you create your destiny. You pick and choose how you want that to look. And I've actually spoken to so many men that are like never regretting their children, but regretting just having sex randomly and going, yeah, cool, let's have this, but actually thinking about what do I want my family to look like. Like, people don't actually plan how they want to run their household, how they want to run their family, how they want to. Like, they don't think about that. It's just all in the moment. Like, this girl's really hot. I'm gonna just talk to this girl. This girl's hot. Boom. Oh, she's pregnant. Yeah, no worries, man. I'm there, innit? I'm there. And then you realise actually you two are like not on the same page, and then you're out. So it's like you're not having a vision for what you want your life and your family to look like before. Cover yourself.
And on that note,
cover yourself. We should be sponsored by Durex.
And on that note, sometimes I sat in my front room and I look at my two youngest ones and I watch the antics that they're getting up with, and I look at Karen's face and I look at my face in the mirror and I'm like, we're so tired. I'm like, this could be the perfect advert for Durex right now, because the two of us are
each other like this.
The two of us are sat there, one on the end of the sofa, one on the other, and the kids. It's almost like you can see it in your head, like a time lapse kind of video. Like the two parents, like, and the kids are just moving at 100 miles an hour, messing up and mashing up everything, food flying all over. Like, just simple Durex. Put you off. Anyway, that's what's up for this week. Please, before you leave, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's down here somewhere. I know I'm pointing at it. And don't forget also the infamous bell at the top that gives you notifications when we're back on next. We will be live, Couple School After School, on Instagram on Tuesday, 8:30. Don't miss it. Come and disagree with me or Charmaine. See, I've changed it. Or don't. Come share your views, your experiences, and anything else in between. We'll be back next week, Sunday at 12 o'clock on YouTube for the next episode of Couple School After School. Not Couple School After School, Couple School Podcast. In the meantime, you guys stay strong, stay focused.
Peace.